Okay, it's 7:01. Shall we get started?
Sounds good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Joelle Degatano, Supervisor of Special Services. And with me tonight, I have Melissa Signori, Superintendent of Schools, and Kimberly Dowling, Supervisor of Curriculum and Instruction. Before I introduce our guest tonight, just a few housekeeping items. Please mute yourselves. It looks like everybody right now is muted. And feel free to turn your cameras on or off, whatever makes you comfortable. We will have time at the end of the presentation for questions, so I will ask that you hold any questions until the end. And then at that time, you can either unmute and ask them or put them in the chat. And Barbara will do her best to answer those questions. So I am very pleased to have Barbara Krug with us tonight. Barbara is a licensed professional counselor who works with West Bergen Mental Health Care. She's currently housed, she currently works in a K-8 district where she provides lessons in social emotional learning and individual and group counseling to her students. She does have a diverse background. She's done work with patients with traumatic brain injury as well as addictions, and she's been involved with therapeutic horseback riding, which is pretty cool. She actually claims to have the best job in the world.
I do.
She does. She loves what she does, and we love to have her come, work with our staff, and we're happy to have her here tonight with some parents. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, I have one more. I'm sorry. One more housekeeping item. We will be recording tonight's session, just so everybody's aware. This will be recorded so that anybody who couldn't come tonight can reference it later. And now I will turn it over to Barbara.
Fantastic. Thank you for the kind words. I am excited to be here to present on social conflict. I'm going to share my screen. I actually have a PowerPoint to kind of break some things down. And this worked before, so let's hope it works again when I share it. Technology and I are not always the best of friends. So here we go. Okay. So yes, thank you. My name is Barbara Krug, and I'm here from West Bergen, and I really do think I have the best job in the world. Tonight, we're going to discuss navigating social conflict. So as I said before, I do work in a K-8, and I know that for my students, this has definitely been a hot topic recently. Coming off of the pandemic, sometimes those social skills need a little bit more work because we had so much time where we were social distancing or remote. And so we may have missed some of that like in-person experience and education on our social skills. So it's really important for us to be able to have these skills in place to be able to navigate conflict. Okay, but before we start, I always like to, especially as a therapist, to just kind of model how we can check in with ourselves. So we're going to just start like by taking a really deep breath in through the nose and holding it, and then out through the mouth. Maybe think about, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling excited? Maybe this is a topic you really want to learn about. Are you feeling stressed? It's the end of a long day. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. It's a Wednesday and there's still Thursday and Friday, and maybe the kids have to go to basketball or they need to be dropped off at dance and there's homework and tests and all of those things. Or maybe it's a mixture of all of the above, or even something else entirely. So it's really good to be able to take notice of where our energy level is at. Is it depleted? Is it high? Or is it in between? While we do that, it's also great to kind of scan the body quickly and see if we're holding any feelings in our body. I will say a yawn right now is probably a really good thing. We hold so much stress and tension in our jawlines, and that can be a way to let that out. So sometimes that stress is also in our stomach. Sometimes we might feel anger in our skeleton. When I talk to the little students that I have, like say K1, 2, 3, sometimes in fourth, we really try to define our feelings and where they live inside our bodies, because we really are emotional beings, and our feelings affect our physical wellness as well. So as I said before, I want to take a deep breath. The way I like to teach therapeutic breathing, I think it's really important to practice because it can help us with so many of our coping skills for feelings, but also for our conflict resolution strategies. I've been using the hot chocolate reference quite often because it's winter, and just picturing a big mug of like a steamy hot chocolate with whipped cream on top, and then taking that big breath in smelling that chocolate, holding it, and then breathing out. So now that we've gotten ourselves into maybe more of a little bit of a relaxed mindset, we're going to move forward. If I can work my little buttons here. And I always like to start with just a couple of interesting facts. So when I was thinking about conflict, I am one of 4 girls. So there was some conflict in my family, whether it was between myself and my siblings, or myself and my parents, or I'm also from a big family who is all in the area. So sometimes that conflict extended into other parts of the family, or my siblings had conflict with their friends, or we had conflict with their friends, or I had conflict with my friends. So I just always like to make it known, conflict is a very normal part of any family. And I found these stats to be really interesting. On average, children have a conflict with a sibling 1 time per hour. I think that was probably especially true in my household with one particular sibling because we're really close in age. So we would have conflict, and conflict's not necessarily a bad thing. We'll get into that in a minute. And adolescents have conflict with parents on the average of 1 time per day. So if you have an adolescent in the household and you're like, why does it feel like we're arguing every single day? It very well could be that there is a conflict every day. Maybe not all rise to an argument, but there could be that conflict each and every day. So our objectives for tonight, I want us to be able to, identify what a social conflict is and how navigating it may actually benefit our children, to understand the importance of emotional intelligence when working on conflict resolution, to identify ways to manage conflict as it's happening, and to identify and be comfortable applying conflict resolution strategies. And to do that, it's really important that we're able to identify and be comfortable utilizing coping skills for big feelings that may accompany conflict. So these would be tangible coping skills that hopefully we're comfortable using after tonight. And they're fun to learn. Okay, so when it comes to social conflict, these are some of our most famous theorists' ideas. If it's worked through, it's healthy and it can teach us to be a better person. Maybe we should think about life is full of conflict and social conflict. And if we're able to overcome or manage it, it can make us better able to communicate with others. It also is a learning experience. And when paired with an adult who is able to model how to manage that conflict in social situations, it can lead our children to function in all different types of social situations. So this sounds like, well, conflict's really not that bad of a thing. Maybe the word gets a bad rap. With guidance to address conflict, it can be a healthy part of growing up.
Excuse me, Barbara. I don't mean to, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think we're seeing your slides. We're just seeing slide 1.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you,
That's
but yeah,
okay.
we were just seeing the first one.
Oh, no.
So yeah, maybe just if you could represent and see maybe if that helps.
Of course. Go to my window. Worst comes to worst, I can also put it in the slidey format. Maybe that'll help.
Oh, there it
So
is.
here's slide 1. Slide 2.
Right now it's on. It says the idea of conflict is not a bad thing, but nothing has changed. It's just staying at that. Maybe is it in present mode? You're in PowerPoint?
I am in PowerPoint. Let me re-escape. Okay, so what if I keep it in this way? So with this, would you see differences in the slides this way?
Yes.
You do? Okay, great. Then that's how I'll keep it.
Okay.
You'll see all my little notes on the bottom, but they're all good. So enjoy them.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
No, of course. That's important. I want people to be able, to differentiate learning. If you hear, great. If you're better breathing it off, even better. Okay, so what we were talking about, the idea of conflict not being a bad thing. So you might be saying to yourself that I'm a crazy person telling you, like, look at the world now. There is a lot of conflict and it could be causing issues and struggles. But that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm discussing how to manage social conflicts as we grow and how, with guidance, they can benefit our children. And some of the ways that that might happen is it may teach our children to navigate their different emotional interactions. And with that, being able to manage when those feelings get really big. It may help them to learn personal boundaries, and it may help them to learn conflict resolution skills, which we know as we get older can be really important. So a guidance approach teaches positive alternatives for unacceptable behaviors, with adults being responsible to teach valued skills that children can use later without an adult's assistance. So basically modeling how to manage this so that we're giving our children the autonomy in the future to be able to manage conflict and to have confidence that they can manage that conflict. So this might assist our children in becoming independent while promoting autonomy and understanding that conflict is part of human nature. So as we were saying before, really important, this will benefit our children by promoting that independence, the autonomy, and an understanding of human nature. But where does this conflict come from? And I don't mean somebody stole my teddy bear, or my friend's not sharing snack with me, or there were 3 of us at recess and somebody wouldn't play with me. But where initially does this conflict come from? Well, according to Foster in 2021, it's the inability for us to find a middle ground with somebody who's different from us. So whether this difference is real or it's perceived, it can feel like a threat. And this threat would be to our core needs and values, as well as to our opinions and interests. So if we think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we may also feel like this threats to our identity, to our safety, to our autonomy, growth, and the brain stimulation. Our hope is that as adults, we typically are going to strive to work through conflict and not let it be a catastrophic part of our lives. So maybe I am in conflict with someone, or I have a minor argument with someone. I don't want it taking over my life. I still need to be able to function and move throughout my day. And so that's why we want to be able to model that for our children. Unfortunately, for our children, and I'm sure especially those of us with middle schoolers, it can feel like even if it's something really minor, that it's like the end of the world. And that's where I really want to go back to that idea that this could be a real threat or it's a perceived threat. It may not be based in reality. It may be just something that the child's perceiving, but for them, it is a very, very real feeling that they're feeling in that moment, that threat is there. And that's why it can really feel like the end of the world. So now that we have a little bit of a further understanding of where conflict starts, how can we support these conflict resolution skills? Well, we start to provide problem-solving skills rather than to solve problems for our children. And this will promote the development of conflict resolution skills. Before we get to some of those resolution skills, we also want to make sure that our children can identify their emotions. And that's what's great about your school district, is that I know you use the ruler method, and Mark Brackett, who is behind the ruler method, really, really strives to promote that emotional intelligence, or our emotional IQ, so that we have the words to share how we feel. So it's a really, really broad topic. Where should we begin? Well, first we want to make sure that our children, that we validate that they're emotional beings, and to promote that emotional intelligence. It sounds silly, of course we know they're emotional beings, but we want to make sure that we're able to reflect on that and to validate it for them, and to understand that sometimes for some children, it's really hard to find those words, and it's really hard for them to identify the emotions. When I'm with my elementary students, I'll do a quick 10-second when I go in the room, show me your happy face, show me your surprise, show me your sad face. And we'll go through a couple of the different feelings just so I can see the range of emotions on them. Unfortunately, sometimes I will see show me your happy face and I'll see a big smile. Show me your sad face and I'll see a big smile. Show me your scared face and I'll see a big smile. And 2 things are usually at play there. 1, the student might be uncomfortable demonstrating that and feeling silly doing it. So I have to flesh that out a little bit. But 2, maybe they really don't have a grasp on those emotions exactly at this point. But it's okay, because we can build that emotional intelligence. When we think about that, it's our ability to not just understand, but also to manage our emotions and use them in positive ways. So we can break that into 4 different areas. There's the relieving of stress. That would be really helpful in conflict resolution, because if I am feeling flooded by the feelings that are in me, it's going to be really hard to do the next step, which is communicating effectively. So first, I want to be able to relieve whatever this feeling is. It doesn't mean it goes away. It just means it makes it a little bit more manageable. Then I want to be able to communicate effectively, something that we know will take us very far in life, being able to have that effective communication style to help somebody to understand what it is that we're feeling. So we want to be able to do that. And again, that helps in conflict resolution, because if I can communicate what I'm feeling, maybe you can understand where I'm coming from in this conflict. That will also help us to build empathy and being able to put ourselves in that other person's shoes. So that's going to help us build our emotional intelligence. It's going to help us to connect with others, to build relationships, and it's also going to help us where conflict's concerned. And we want to be able to overcome challenges. All of these lead right up to that overcoming challenges and then to build up our resiliency. So if we've been able to really target those coping skills, be able to communicate, we're also able to empathize. Now I want to build up my resiliency and be able to overcome different challenges. And some of those challenges might be that even if we're friends, we might not be getting along. Even if we're not friends and we have conflict, we still want to try to be kind and respectful of each other because we're in school and it's our school community, or because we're on a team together and trying to work together for a common goal. And when I say team, I mean, it could be a sports team, but it could also be when we think further ahead as our children turn into adolescents and young adults, it could be a work team as well. So if this emotional intelligence is fostered, it can lead us to great things. It can lead us to academic success, career success, different social successes, better physical health, because we're able to cope with the stress, and that will lower the cortisol levels in our body. And when our cortisol is high, it can lead to stress responses that include some physical ailments. And it can also help us to have stronger relationships. So by fostering our children's emotional intelligence, our children will have a better understanding of self-management. How do I manage these big feelings? So as I said before, with our coping skills, they'll be able to increase and have a better understanding of self-awareness. What am I feeling? And why am I feeling this way? Was it because of an event? Was there a thought? Did it lead to this feeling? Why am I feeling this way? There could be that increase in social awareness, having that empathy for others and understanding what others feel. Can I understand the way that you might be feeling? Can I also feel that feeling? And could that feeling make me act a certain way? As relationship management's our fourth here, and that's our ability to develop, maintain, and communicate. How do I make and keep my friends? How do I let them know how I feel? Do I have social skills? Are my social skills strong? Or do I feel like I'm stumbling around trying to find them? So as we can see, these four things really do lend themselves to managing and resolving not just our feelings, but also conflict. So as I said before, it's really hard to escape it at any point in our life. At some point, most of us will have a conflict happen. So how do we resolve? And this is more for an adult with children. How can we do our best and help our children to learn to manage these emotions? Well, the first thing to do, if possible, is to not react. And that's why I always like to start this off with, let's check in with ourselves. Because if we're feeling stressed, if we're feeling exhausted, it may be a little bit harder for us to not react, especially end of day, bedtime's drawing near, things like that. So the reaction, if we have one, could possibly escalate that conflict. We want to look at this conflict and notice, is it something that needs to be addressed right now? Is it something that could benefit from our support? Or is this a conflict that the children may be able to work out themselves? Of course, always looking to make sure everything's safe. Are you needed for additional support? Maybe as you come up, take the curious approach of what's happening here, or ask an open-ended question. And then actively listen while also encouraging each child to actively listen. It's really important. So this conflict's going on. we see that it's not going to resolve. So if possible, especially if the children are having a difficult time discussing how they're feeling or being able to tell you how they're feeling, utilize a cool off period. So again, we're trying not to react because we don't want either child to think they're in trouble at this point because we're not 100% sure what's going on, even though we might have a really good hunch that what's going on. We want to hear it from the child. So to utilize this cooling off period, maybe we use like a cooling corner, separate the children. Maybe one goes to their room again, as long as they're safe, they're not tantruming, or there's no outburst where you feel like their safety is a concern, and let them remove themselves for a moment, or talk to them and offer a coping skill first. And if you're like, what kind of coping skill could I offer for this? We're going to go through a whole bunch in a little bit. And then communication. Communication, as we said before, is really important. We want to encourage active listening from both children to each other. Let's maintain eye contact. Let's open our ears and hear what the other person's saying, but also making sure we're really listening to what's being said. And then to promote I statements. So if you've never heard of an I statement before, it's I feel, and then what the feeling is. And sometimes those can be hard to identify and may take a little bit of time to really think through. When? So the one should be I feel angry, frustrated, sad, when we're arguing over the teddy bear, when I'm trying to play and I feel like it's being ripped out of my hands because I feel like you're not going to return it, or I feel like I'm not going to get a chance to play with it. So I feel that feeling when, what's going on, because a little bit more. Is this a feeling? Is it a thought? Is it an action? In the future, can you please? So that's really like an advanced I statement. If we can start with, especially depending on the age of the children, if they're younger, I feel when, and stop there, that's absolutely okay. At least we're getting what the feeling is and what's going on. And I really promote the idea that not use statements, I statements to take away any defensiveness. So you're going to get your chance to talk first using I statements. The other person shouldn't be interrupting, who's part of the conflict, because you're going to get your chance then to tell me what's going on as well. Again, using those I statements. Because if we fall into that, you did this, you did that, you can see that conflict is going to increase. And we also want to, throughout this process, teach and encourage personal responsibility. So the child gives their I statement and maybe work with them to reflect on what happened and what was their part in it. I felt frustrated when we were trying to play with the bear and you took him because I was afraid I would never get him back. So what was your part in this? Well, when you took the bear, I called you a name, or what was it that you may have been involved in throughout this? And how could that have made the other person feel? So let's look at this from both sides. I'm really promoting, again, that perspective taking and the empathy building. To do this, we ask open-ended questions about what could have been different in the situation. Is there a way we could have acted differently? And if the child's able to really reflect and come up with their part in this conflict, we put the praise on, really pour the praise on, not, in a way that's going to make the other person feel bad, but in a, wow, it's a really mature thing to be able to admit your personal part in this conflict. It's really important to be able to admit a mistake. This is amazing. And then together, brainstorm solutions. What I love to do with this is I love to have the children brainstorm all sorts of solutions, no matter how outlandish, as long as they're not mean towards each other or attacking each other. So what if we got a cloning machine and we put the bear in the cloning machine and now we have 10 bears, and how amazing is this? So again, as outlandish as they like, and then tapering it down to a solution that is appropriate and can be enacted. So maybe we each play with the bear for 10 minutes. Maybe today you play with the bear and I play with the elephant. If someone ends up reverting back to those insults or any type of physically lashing out, then we want to, again, go back to the beginning, enact the space and a coping skill. Once we've managed our way through the conflict, we want to acknowledge each other's experience. Again, validate that we each had these feelings. I hear that you felt frustrated, or I hear that you felt scared. I hear that you felt hurt. If an apology is necessary, the person who would be apologizing, and it could be all the people involved in the conflict, it could be one or two people involved in the conflict, depending how big the conflict is, have them apologize. And then the other person should be accepting that apology appropriately. Now, I know I am very guilty of that with my sister. I mean, I was obviously the perfect child. No, not really. So if we would argue, one of us would apologize and maybe stick our tongue back out at the other person, or, the one person would apologize and be like, yeah, okay, you don't really mean it, and then storm off, because that's kind of how we responded to each other. This is definitely way more of a healthy way to work through that conflict. Now, all of that being said, what if the child has difficulty managing a really big feeling and that feeling gets too big? So there is no way, Barbara, what are you talking about? I can't get to communicating our feeling because that feeling has taken over the room for one or both of the children. So things that we want to be able to do in that situation, we want to be able to stay calm. I hate that phrase because when there's a lot going on around us, it is really hard to stay calm. So instead, I like to say, take notice of our own feelings. Where are we at? Are we feeling frustrated? If we're feeling frustrated and we've gotten into a conflict with the child, so whether this is we're intervening in conflict or it's one-on-one with the child and we're having a conflict with them, it is absolutely perfectly okay, as long as the child adolescent is safe, to model a coping skill, to model taking a time out yourself and to say, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm going to take some space and we will continue this discussion once I've managed this frustration. It's absolutely okay to do that, so that you're not coming from the live feeling right now, not that the anger or the frustration is going to go away. But I tell the little ones, it's like our feeling volcano. Like, our feeling volcano is not exploding. We're able to bring it back down so that we can really listen and talk out what this conflict is. So in this instance, we could model therapeutic breathing, or some of the coping skills we'll go over in a little bit. If the child's tantruming or ignoring you, it's really important to try to make eye contact or demonstrate other nonverbals that show you're there to help and that you're paying attention. This also could go if a child is having a conflict and they don't want to talk about it, and maybe the conflict happened at school and they're home and they're crying or they're angry, but for whatever reason they seem inconsolable and they're not ready to talk yet. They're just trying to get this feeling out. Staying close range and letting them know that you're there and validating that you're seeing that there's something going on. Yes, sometimes, especially with our teens, we might get a remark back like, just leave me alone, but letting them know, okay, I'm here and I'm ready to talk whenever you are. We want to be able to communicate clearly without raising our voices. Because anger is kind of like the contagious feeling. So if somebody is angry and they're yelling at us and we yell back, it's just going to set that anger off for each person and really try to rise it. I do like to say, though, if we're trying to get through somebody who's really feeling this big feeling and we feel like whatever we're doing is not working, how am I going to get through to you? I call it, again, to my middle schoolers and my elementary students, I say, I use my attention voice. It's a strong voice, but it's a deep, strong voice, and it cuts through whatever is going on around them. If possible, if there's another child involved in the conflict and we're trying to manage this big feeling, if possible, we want to be able to separate and to speak privately, because we want to enact that coping skill and we don't want the child who's experiencing the big feeling to necessarily feel shame for having the big feeling. We want them to be able to manage it. We want to acknowledge and validate that there's anger or sadness or something's upsetting you. And then to also try to understand what is the root of this and to summarize and clarify what we're hearing. So I've said it already a few times, but being able to, and I've said it in a few different ways, being able to repeat something back, what the feeling is that I heard. So we talked about it before with the conflict resolution strategy of, I want to acknowledge how you were feeling. Here, we want to acknowledge that, yes, I'm seeing you're feeling this way. You're telling me the reason you're feeling this way. So I'm hearing you're feeling this way because, and that way the child really knows that we have listened to them, but we're also like cutting them off of the, well, that's not what I said. Because if we're able to repeat it back and they're like, oh no, that's not what I said. This is what I said, or this is what I meant. And then we are able to go back to step one and go meet with the other child to work out this conflict resolution or conflict resolution strategies. We already know what they said and what they're feeling, so we can help with that and monitor that feeling. So then we want to try to build on what they're saying. We also want to be able to offer a way out. So maybe separating from the situations that's causing this feeling. Like I said before, speaking privately can be really helpful, utilizing a coping skill and reflecting on what's frustrating them. I do like to make it known, like if this is a conflict between you and the child and the feeling is too big, it's perfectly okay to enact that coping skill and reflect on what's frustrating them and let them manage the feeling without bringing up limits or consequences at that point. That doesn't mean you can't revisit that later. So if the child did something and there was a limit or there's a consequence to it, maybe they played on Roblox for 3 hours when their time limit is an hour and a half. And so the limit is you can't play Roblox for 3 days. And they're really in this big feeling because of it. Let's manage the feeling first. We'll have that discussion about the limits or the consequences once the feeling is managed. It doesn't have to be right at that time because that's just going to stir that conflict and make it bigger. And we also want to be able to encourage solution finding. We want to help the child to manage the feeling and feel like they're part of finding the solution when we're going back, especially to the strategy of brainstorming what the solutions could be and having a voice in that solution, and reassure the child that when they present a I'm sorry, my voice got stuck. Reassure the child when they're presenting a reasonable solution to the conflict. I'm not talking about negotiating here. I'm talking about if the conflict was with another child and we've removed them from the situation. Because the limit or the consequence, that if that was something for the Roblox and that's the limit, we want to make sure we stick to that limit and not negotiate on it. So there are ways to increase our conflict resolution skills before conflict ever happens. I always like to give these out. They're really good for relationship building, especially in the family. I can't say how many parents come into my offices and tell me it is amazing. Nothing ever happens at school because the child comes home and it's like, so what'd you do today? Nothing. And then they ask, how do I get my child to talk to me more? So not only are the things I'm going to present really great for increasing conflict resolution skills, but they're also really good for increasing communication skills and relationship building. So games. Games are fantastic, and it doesn't have to be any big crazy game. One of my favorites, I'm looking around at my desktop, I actually put it away already, is Uno. Uno is fantastic because I have to take the time and think about what move I'm going to make, but part of it is luck, so that's building my frustration tolerance, planning out my strategy and my moves are going to help me with my impulse control so that, that idea of if you have a child who's the thought comes in the head and out the mouth before thinking through what that thought is, and that can put them in conflict. Uno is a great game for that, as is chess, checkers, things where I have to think about what the other person might do. Jenga is another great one because I have to take my time and think out the move, and I also have to manage maybe feelings of nervousness or anxiety when the building gets tall and it might topple over. So these games are great for problem solving, for communication, for frustration tolerance. I only am semi-joking around when I say try to stay away from Monopoly because that really does seem to cause more conflict. Story about my aunt and uncle's engagement breaking up like 3 or 4 times due to playing Monopoly. For whatever reason, people do have a difficult time managing conflict with Monopoly, but I think it's a fun game. Other things I like to do, different stories. If you're doing bedtime stories with your children, it's a great way to build emotional intelligence, perspective taking, and empathy. If you want something really fun to read, look for the Fractured Fairy Tales. It is the telling of fairy tales, typically from the villain side. So I've done the retelling of The Three Little Pigs from the wolf's point of view. I've done Hansel and Gretel from the witch's point of view. And I've done Cinderella from her stepmother's point of view. So it's a great way to build perspective taking and empathy, and to realize that, there's multiple sides to every story. And it's a great way for us to reflect on different problems that the characters in these stories might face, and popcorn different solutions to build problem solving skills. Like, so we see that this problem happened. How could, maybe it's two friends in conflict in the book. How could these friends try to resolve this? And when we are not emotionally attached to what the conflict is, it's a lot easier to come up with some solutions. Different quick activities that I like to do, again, to build our emotional intelligence, but also to build that relationship skills and our conflict resolution skills. The emotion faces, that's fun. That's something that can be done as a game in the car, at dinner. Let's all make silly faces. Let's all make happy faces. Let's all make angry faces. Emotional charades, like if you're ever playing charades, you can mix it in with not just movies or not just books. Let's do feelings too. Can you non-verbally act out what angry looks like? Can you act out what jealous might look like? Highs and lows are a great one that I do a lot of teaching of social emotional learning in the school district I'm in, but I also do have a few groups that I run. And I never, I think, felt fuller than one of my students came in one day and was like, oh, those highs and lows that we do at the beginning of group, I've introduced those to my family at dinner time, and now we all go through. So maybe nothing's going on throughout the day, whether the child was at camp, whether they were at school, and you're getting that nothing answer. That high is like, oh, well, what was the best part of your day? And low might be something that was tough. And you might only get highs, or you might only get lows. But it's a great way, again, to build that conversation. It also builds empathy and is going to help with emotional identification. And another one I like is just pulling a conversation starter at mealtime. I actually have, I think it's in my desk, talking cubes. So if you feel like it's difficult to think of a different conversation starter, there are all sorts of things online. There's plenty of free ones that you can cut out. Conversation cubes are fun. I think anybody who's ever been to like a Cracker Barrel has seen there's the square thing on the table and you just pull the card and there's a conversation starter in it. So those are great ways, again, to build those relationships as well as conflict resolution. Sometimes it can be as simple as presenting a non-hot button issue. And I apologize if this is a hot topic for people, but the idea of waffles or French toast, which is better. So how can we debate this? How can we debate it respectfully and disagree without an argument starting? When it comes to conflict, there are a lot of feelings that are underlying it. So I like to think of these two specifically. Anger, because it's the Band-Aid emotion, it usually covers up something bigger underneath, and we'll get into that in a minute. And frustration without being able to communicate our needs. So for some children, for some adolescents, it's really hard to communicate what exactly happened. So we see that there's a big feeling, and maybe they're crying or they're yelling, and they're just like, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. Let's start thinking about scaling it. Would this problem, would it fit into a big box, a medium box, or a small box? And start to try to break it down that way. And then, of course, anxiety, any type of anxious or traumatic distress, or feeling overwhelmed or exhausted by what is being asked of them. So think about like conflicts over taking out the garbage or something like that. Or you need to go to your sports practice tonight. I'm just feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Different feelings of hurt and betrayal and worthlessness and hopelessness can all add into that conflict. So when we talk about anger, I often talk about this angry iceberg. So the anger is on top. It's like that Band-Aid is covering up these other feelings. So you can see scared and rejected, hurt, frustrated, and humiliated are underneath. And these feelings can really affect our self-worth, our value, our frustrations, and like, how am I going to get what I want? And maybe our Maslow's hierarchy of needs feel threatened. Now we have that perceived threat. And it's because I'm angry or I'm acting angry because maybe somebody said something at lunch, and whether they said it to be mean or I perceived it as something that was said that was mean, or I perceived being left out because somebody sat next to someone else because they were working on a project. And that can trigger that angry response because there are these other feelings underneath. I have a little bit more information about anger underneath, but in the interest of time, we're going to go through a little bit quicker. But I do want to highlight that we remember anger can be a symptom of not feeling safe or having our basic needs met. And that basic need can be that feeling of belonging with our friends. So again, whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat, if we feel like our friendships are threatened, that can lead to conflict with the particular friend that we feel that friendship is threatened by, or with another person that we feel is, trying to take our friend away. And that can be really difficult. So some tools for anger. So if we're seeing that anger when it comes to conflict and that feeling's gotten really big, things to remember is we can't control anger with anger. We want to be able to breathe and maybe scale the problem if we're not hearing what the underlying feelings are. And we'll go over breathing in a minute. Maybe ask some questions of the child. Are you feeling mad? Are you feeling angry, irritated? Because anger does have different scales to it. We want to see if there's a reason. We want to encourage the effective communication. Those I statements, again, are really important. Give the power back a little bit of, and I'm not saying like release your power as a parent. I'm saying give the child some power by giving them that voice to speak. Tell me your story. What happened? What's the story? And if they're having a big feeling that's turning into a tantrum, break it down into the idea of choices. It's your choice to continue acting this way, knowing that there may be a limit or a consequence, or it's your choice to try this coping skill with me. So we can talk about what's going on and see if we can find a solution together. And that's also if we're having a conflict with them. Muscle tension and release, squeezing our muscles, taking a big breath and relaxing is a great way to manage anger. And the chicken dance. It sounds ridiculous, but I have yet to see somebody not smile if an adult is doing the chicken dance. So it's one I say if, the child responds to that humor. The other feeling that I did mention that goes under this, the other feeling I did mention when it comes to social conflict is anxiety. Because when we're scared, we can maybe lash out a little bit at those who are closer to us because we feel safe around them. And that can lead us into this conflict. So I just always add this little meme. What could possibly go wrong? And our anxiety gives us all these things that could possibly go wrong within our brain. So it's just an idea of how exhausting it can be. Some symptoms you might notice if your child is struggling with anxiety would be the physical symptoms, complaining of a stomachache or headache, feeling restless or fidgety. They might not be using bathrooms in school or in public. They might feel distracted, falling asleep, staying asleep. They might start shaking or sweating because of anxiety-inducing situations, to the point where they may start to put up a wall and not want to go into activities that they really enjoy. When this starts to happen, like say there's social activities, I don't want to go to my soccer practice, or I don't want to go to the performance I'm supposed to be in. So that can be really difficult because now you're going to have these symptoms. It's almost like a wall comes up for the child. It's really hard to get into it. Then there's the idea that I might be disappointing my team. I might be disappointing my friend. Feelings of guilt might start to come up. Feelings of shame might start to come up. And then I might lash out at my friend when they simply ask, hey, where were you? We missed you. And I might have a response that's not really nice because I want to hide that I had these feelings. So again, the idea of that anger covering up the Band-Aid. When it comes to other symptoms of anxiety, we think emotionally, there may be increased crying. The child might appear overly sensitive or cranky. They may be worrying about the future or be fixated on their worries. You may see that they have an increase in bad dreams or nightmares. They behaviorally might start to avoid social situations, might start to avoid school. There may be an increase in what-if questions. And again, if it continues, we might see that withdrawal from group activities and group work, an increase in approval-seeking behaviors, and an increase in tantruming. So that's great, Barbara. You've told us all about these feelings, but what do I do if my child's lashing out and not managing this big feeling? And it's causing difficulties between myself and the child, the siblings and the child, their friends and the child. What are some coping skills that I can use? My favorite to teach is to breathe the triangle. And I teach that one because it's a count of 3. And that's the only number you have to remember. So you breathe in for a count of 3 through your nose. You hold that breath for a count of 3, and you breathe out for a count of 3 for a total of 3 times. As we discussed before, there's breathing the hot chocolate. There's so many different ways to breathe. I know people who breathe on their Calm app, and you don't even just need a phone anymore for the Calm app. You can have that on an Apple Watch or a smartwatch, so that can help you with the breathing as well. Muscle relaxation, so starting at your toes and working your way all the way up, scrunching up your toes as tight as you can, taking a big breath, relaxing those toes out, moving up to your calves, moving up to your stomach, to, I always say fists, keep them at your sides, your shoulders, your jawline. Again, we hold a ton of tension there, even to your eyes. Breathing each time you relax that muscle, and then working your way back down. Another favorite of mine is tapping. I find this is really good if a child's in a social situation and they are feeling anxious, or if they're trying to manage a feeling like my friend is mad at me and I need to talk to them and I want to talk to them and I know what I'm going to say, but this anxiety is really starting to eat me up. Tapping is just the pads of our fingers back and forth, and it pulls us out of our brain and into our body a little bit. Sometimes our schoolwork starts to bring us that anxiety. And again, I have some of these coping skills on here because these underlying feelings can lead to that conflict. So just, it's always better to share more coping skills than not. I am conscious at the time, and I'm going to talk really fast, but we're almost at the end, I promise. So breaking up the mountain, let's not think of all the 8 million things that we have to do. And this can work when you're in a conflict with a friend too. Like, let's not think about, being best friends again right away. Let's just think about, how are we going to improve our communication first? Or how are we going to manage this feeling that this conflict has left us with? 5 senses grounding. If the child's having that big feeling again, thinking of 5 things that they can see and really describing them. 4 things that they can touch, and what does it feel like? 3 things that they can hear, 2 that they can smell, and 1 that they can taste. If you don't have time for that, a hard candy does the trick. A Dum Dum, a Jolly Rancher, a Hershey Kiss, because you can look at it, see what it looks like. You can touch it and feel the crinkliness. You can open it and hear the little crinkliness. You can smell it. And I like to think of the Hershey Kiss. It smells chocolatey and delicious. And then you can eat it. Take a break, journal it. Sometimes journaling, especially when it comes to conflict with a group of friends, can be really, really helpful. Maybe I can't say what's bothering me, but maybe I can write it down. And maybe I don't want them to know it's bothering me, so I can rip it up and they'll never see what happened. Not that it's good to hold feelings inside. It's not, but maybe the child's not ready yet to work through that conflict. Blow it into bubbles, pop the bubbles, talk out loud to your brain, and address any automatic negative thoughts that there might be. Well, my friend didn't come to, or they weren't my partner for sit-ups during basketball practice today. They must not like me anymore. When maybe there was a whole different reason that they were partners with someone else. So, I'm good at basketball. I went to practice. I did a good job. My friend was partners with somebody else, but I was able to meet someone else and do my sit-ups with them. Let's talk out loud and address those thoughts. And then, of course, talking to the child about what they're feeling and validating that feeling. Yes, I hear that you're feeling hurt because your friend did the sit-ups with someone else. And that really can feel hurtful. So with all of those, we come back to this same slide, just in a little bit of a different form. So now that we have those bigger feelings and we've been able to manage them, we come on back and that conflict happens. And if possible, we want to try to utilize a cooling off period. We want to be able to communicate with active listening. And if it's 2 children or 3 children or 5 children or however many children in front of you, encouraging them to actively listen to each other. If it's not, encouraging the child who's in the conflict, the next time they're talking to this person, to actively listen to them and to, use their I statements and say how they're really feeling. To teach and encourage their personal responsibility and have the child reflect on what's happening and what their part of it in it is. And to ask open-ended questions to see how they could have acted differently, to brainstorm different solutions, again, thinking outlandish as long as they're not mean and violent. And then coming back to what are manageable solutions to this problem that we actually can do. And then acknowledging what happened, an apology if necessary, and accepting that apology. So there are a couple books that I do like for children when it comes to big feelings and for conflict resolution. So the one is The Art of Conflict Resolution for Kids. And this is by Martha Foster. It is a great book that you can read with your child about what to do in a conflict. And another one that can actually take you through your whole life is the Conflict Resolution Playbook. Both are pretty good for managing conflict and giving us strategies to really manage conflict. This one is more for throughout our lifetime. So as adults, like how to manage conflict in our personal and our professional relationships. If you're looking for information on big feelings, like online, you can find so many great things, of course. The SOS Feelings books are fantastic. I can't say enough about those because they're written with little comics. So it's a great tool to read with your child, no matter what their age is. These resources really probably don't apply to what we were talking about tonight, but I think it's really important in Bergen County to give them out because you never know who may need them. If there's ever an emergency, please remember to call 911. If you feel like there is a child, adult, somebody in crisis, you call 201-262-HELP and they will respond within an hour to 90 minutes to help the person manage that crisis, whatever it may be. There is one specific for children as well. If there's an emotional crisis, you call 1-877-852-7624. That's for up to the age of 21, and they too respond within an hour to 90 minutes. Most of these also will set you up for in-home services once everything's assessed. So the in-home services would be if further evaluation at a hospital is not needed. There is also the crisis text line, which is 741-741. Please excuse the typo that I keep making on this resource slide. It should say TWO. But the first two responses are automated. I can't think of anything more frustrating than reaching out for help and finding out you're talking to a robot. So it is just the first two responses as they find the right counselor to talk to you. For middle schoolers and adolescents, Second Floor is fantastic in New Jersey. So for anything that's not crisis level, whether it is struggles academically, pure struggles, struggles at home, 888-222-2228 from the ages of 10 to 24, 365 days a year, 24/7. They also have a text line and a chat room on their website. They are fantastic. What if I know somebody who's struggling with mental health? What can we do to get them treatment? Well, Bergen County has fantastic resources. You just call your insurance and go through them. If you have any further questions, of course, you are welcome to contact me here at West Bergen. My name is Barbara Krug. You can see my email and my phone and extension number, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. For any information regarding access to treatment, you can call our Access Center. So that would be 201-688-7098. Esther or Serene or Ashley will take your information and set you up with whatever you need to know, which is what's wonderful. They're great there. And because my mother was an ELA teacher, oh my goodness, my works cited. There we go. Now they've popped up. There's always a works cited page. So if you want any additional information, you can look at these sources. There's some great articles up here, some awesome websites to go to as well. So at this point, I'm going to stop my share and return back to seeing everybody's faces or cameras. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
No. I don't see any questions, Barbara.
No, I'm not seeing any.
There's none in the chat.
Any?
No. Going once?
No, I don't see any in the chat as well.
Nothing.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Barbara. This was great. We really appreciate you coming out tonight.
Of course, anytime.
And I said earlier, this was recorded, so we will have our tech department figure out how to get that out on our website so anybody who was unable to attend tonight is able to watch your presentation.
Great.
So thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Barbara, for presenting, and everybody have a great night.
Thank you very much. Good night.